Welcome to this webinar on mindfulness. My name is Marvin G. Belzer. I'm a professor in psychiatry, work at the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. In our session today, I will talk about the basics of mindfulness, how we practice mindfulness in a meditation. We will do a meditation together. I have received numerous great questions in your registration, so we'll cover some of those questions. In the second part, we will talk about ways we can integrate more mindfulness into daily life, including daily life as it is now. Well, we're sheltering at home, and so there are a number of areas there around sleep, around eating, relationships, our relationship to the news, our relationship to chores, and I think in the blurb for this presentation, I promised I would talk about dancing. So we will get to that too. Mindfulness is, and by the way, some of you may have been at my colleague Diana Winston's seminar a couple of weeks ago. She, I believe it is available as a webinar, even if you weren't there. So I will cover some of the same material. She talked some about the emerging science of mindfulness. I will not take the time to do that in this presentation. I'll keep the focus more on the practicalities, how we practice it, and so forth. But if you're interested in that, then we can be in touch about how to get that webinar. And then she also will be coming back to do another one in a couple of weeks. So mindfulness is a capacity that we all have. It's not something that we have to struggle to create. It's our ability to be aware of what's happening in our experience as it happens. And so simply being able to know what sounds you're hearing, what you're seeing, what sensations you can feel right now in your body, what you're thinking, emotions you have, this is being mindful, being present with our experiences. And it turns out that there are things we can do to cultivate this capacity, to refine it, to deepen it, but we don't have to create it. One of the best ways to refine and deepen this capacity is through meditation. This is where much of the science around mindfulness gets traction, where people are put in a class of 6 or 8 weeks, taught the basics of mindfulness, pre and post studies of certain ability or certain states, such as ability to sleep well. And so this is how the science is done. And what we'll cover in these next few minutes is what actually would be covered in one of those intro courses. One of the very, at least the beginning elements, but the truth is the beginning elements are pretty much the core of it. And so I like to break down what we do in a mindfulness meditation into 2 parts. The first is we use our ability to direct our attention, and we do it in a very simple way. By directing our attention, I mean something as simple as if you can see, maybe you cannot, but if you can see and you can see me on your screen, you can focus your attention on my hand, which I'm holding up here. And even if there are other things in your visual field which are more interesting than that hand, you can still exert a little bit of effort to keep your attention focused on the hand. This is a simple example of focusing our attention. And of course, we use this capacity all the time. And I invite you to set aside assumptions that you have about how well you can focus. Even if you feel like your mind's racing and it's always getting distracted one way or the other, you still can focus your attention well enough to meditate. You may find that hard to believe, and I hope maybe in a few minutes to show you otherwise. People often have sort of misleading views about meditation. For example, it's very common for people to think that in order to meditate properly, we have to somehow clear our minds so that we're not having any thoughts or any distractions and so forth. And this is simply false. First of all, there's no way just to decide we're going to clear our minds by deciding to. And fortunately, we don't have to do so. And so in a few minutes when we meditate, I'll invite you to direct your attention to the ambient sounds, to the sounds you can hear just in your space. I'll invite you to notice what sensations you can feel in your body. And this is something you definitely can do. And to do this, you don't have to get rid of other things. And so you may even have a lot of distractions going on in the space that you're in right now. You don't have to fix all of that. So what we're going to do does require some effort. We have to decide to try, but it's doable, it's manageable effort. And it's not superhuman effort. It's something we all can do if we're motivated to try. So we do have to try, but it's something we can do. So that's the first part. The second is, no matter how hard we try to keep the attention focused on the sensations of the breath or the sensations in our hands or somewhere or sounds, we all will notice those moments when the attention has drifted, when we've been pulled into some thoughts like planning for the afternoon, or maybe a random memory comes to mind and draws our attention away. This is perfectly normal. It's the nature of our minds to move quickly from one thing to another to another. And insofar as we're trying to keep our attention focused on something relatively simple, like the breath, quite naturally our habits kick in. It's really our intelligence that kicks in. And as human beings, we're highly skilled. It's amazing how we can keep track of the past, we can remember the past, we can plan for the future, we can worry about the future. All of these are normal human skills that are important, and they will kick in as we try to meditate. In mindfulness meditation, what we do when we realize the attention has been pulled away is simply include whatever it is. Just that recognition, thinking, planning, worrying. Often there will be emotions that are noticeable, some degree of fear, anxiety, anger, joy, perhaps, might be positive. So whatever it is, this kind of there, we include it. And what that means is feeling into our bodies. Often with these emotions, there are sensations we can observe, often in the torso, in the shoulders, the neck, the head. So we just notice what is actually going on for me. We don't try to fix the emotion, even if it's an emotion we prefer not to have. We don't try to outsmart it in some way. We just are giving ourselves a space to be real, just to notice this is happening. Our responsibilities are pretty minimal in this space of meditation, but we do try to include whatever it is, and then we bring the attention back to wherever we were trying to focus before, whether it's sounds, sensations in our hands or feet, or with the breath. So I like the model of a pendulum. We focus somewhere, our attention gets pulled away, we include whatever it is, and then we gently come back. So as a professor teaching this sort of thing, one of my skills is repeating myself. And I do repeat myself a lot because it's really important to see that what we're doing in meditation is not a very complex task. Indeed, this is where it can be difficult because we're used to more complex tasks, right? And so as you may notice when we meditate now, it'll take some effort. You may wonder, how much effort do I need to make? You don't need to make that much, but it's more of a willingness to be patient and sit through this. So we'll take about 12, 13 minutes for this part. I'll guide you in a meditation, and we can meditate in any posture. And so we can be sitting, we can be standing, we can be lying down. Even if you're bedridden, you can do this. Midway, I will invite you to bring a little motion into the meditation. So when we begin, whether sitting, standing, or lying down, I will invite you to be relatively still, but movement is okay. And indeed, we can bring movement into our meditation. And since most of us probably will be sitting, we can bring movement in. I'll just invite you to shift your body a little bit left to right, and just notice the feel of the motion. And we'll talk about that as we get there. And then we'll end, near the end, we'll settle back into the more still posture. So eyes can be open or closed. Most of us will probably find it easier with our eyes closed, but either way is fine. And as we begin, you might take a few deeper breaths. Yeah, so just breathe in slightly deeper a few times. Slightly deeper in breath and out breath. And letting your breath be normal. We'll come back to the breath in a minute or two. For now, just notice the sounds you can hear. So you might hear some sounds coming through my laptop. You hear my voice probably when I'm speaking. Whatever sounds there are in your environment, just notice what they are. You may have some sounds in your own head. Some of us, including me, have some tinnitus, a little bit of ringing in our ears, or maybe a lot. So just notice what it is, and notice how easy this is. We don't have to censor any sounds. We don't have to keep track of all of them. We don't have to try to hear all of them. Just in the midst of whatever is happening, just notice this changing flow of sounds. So the reason we would spend time doing this is this simple mental activity, focusing, sustaining attention with something relatively simple, our minds naturally become calmer, more settled, more peaceful. So even when we hear something like a siren, which you may hear, it's in my environment, it's all right. We didn't have to fix that. Just noticing. And then it's good to practice in a similar way with sensations in our bodies. So when you wish, just letting your attention settle into your body. And so we're shifting our focus now from the ambient sounds to the sensations we can feel in our bodies. Vibration, pressure, softness, tingling. Maybe some of us feel pain in places. I'll talk about pain a little later. Just notice though what you notice. Head and shoulders and arms and hands, torso, legs, feet. You may notice a lot, you may not notice that much, so it doesn't matter. It's a mental activity. We're not trying to get something out of the sensations. It's a mental activity, this focusing, sustaining attention. And again, we don't try to observe everything all at once. Indeed, it can be nice just to let the attention rest somewhere in your hands, perhaps, or feet, or lower back. And then the normal breath is pretty good for most people much of the time for our purposes. Just the feel of the breath in the abdomen or the chest, slight movement, rising with the in-breath, sort of falling, softening, dissolving with the out-breath. There's also a flow of fine sensations typically at the opening of the nostrils. Air coming into our bodies, air leaving our bodies. So you might let your attention rest there. So for these next couple minutes, just letting your attention rest somewhere with the breath, the nose, the chest, the abdomen, just noticing how you know the in-breath is beginning, these sensations. And the out-breath begins, what it feels like, it unfolds, dissolves, maybe a pause. Next in-breath, so we don't need to control the breath, but we let it be natural. If we wish, we can stay with hands or feet or go back to sounds. So I'll be silent for a couple minutes. We can try this. So keeping in mind that try as we might to keep our attention settled, there will be moments when we realize we've been drawn into thoughts, perfectly normal, planning the rest of the day, a memory of something from the morning or whatever it might be. Just that gentle recognition, thinking. We don't have to squelch the thoughts. We don't have to make our minds stop in any way, but we can notice whatever it is, just noticing, reconnecting back to the breath or wherever you are focusing. So it can be good to sit still, but we don't have to be rigid. And indeed, we can bring some motion into our meditation. So if you wish, you can do this. If you prefer just to remain still, that's fine. But just to kind of get it on the table here. We can let our bodies move a little bit, maybe left to right. If you're sitting or standing, just shifting your weight a little bit from one side to the other. If you are lying down or cannot sit up or stand, you might still be able to move a little bit, move one arm or hand. Just a little bit of motion can be useful as an alternative to the still posture. And we just tune in to what it feels like. So maybe if you can, leaning to the left, letting your weight settle to the left a little bit. Slowly coming back to balance, upright, leaning over to the other side. Just a little bit, not a lot of motion, but just a little. Maybe stopping when you can't go further, coming back. So for the next couple minutes, just letting yourself experiment with what it's like to be attuned to a little bit of motion within your body. What we're doing here is something that those of us who can stand and walk can turn into a walking meditation, but the essence of it is simply being attuned to sensations in our bodies. In that case, it would be the sensations in our feet as we shift our weight, and then allow the shifting to become a moving, and so forth. So we don't have time to do that today, but what we're doing now, if you're moving at all, is the essence of standing and walking meditation. So none of this is a performance, right? Even if someone can see you right now and wondering what you're doing, it's like, we're not performing, not even for ourselves. It's much more just another opportunity, even if with a little movement, to be attuned to sensations in our bodies. And then for the last couple minutes of our meditation, I invite you to settle back into a more still posture, whether lying down, seated, or standing. So when you wish, letting the motion stop if you were moving, letting your attention rest again with some part of the breath, abdomen, chest, or nose. Just knowing the sensations that are there. We're not creating them. Sensations in our hands, perhaps, or coming back to sounds. So we'll just take another 30 seconds for the meditation part. Even noticing one breath is not a small thing. So we don't have to score how well we did up until now. Just this breath now. So thank you. We'll end the meditation there. And just a brief review of what we did. I told you I was good at repeating myself. Of course, I don't know what you did. It's none of my business. But what I guided you in was this simple mental activity that is something we can do. It takes some effort. But I invited you first to take a few deeper breaths. It's just one way to begin. It's one way to begin. And then I invited you to notice the ambient sounds you could hear. I invited you to bring your attention into your bodies, notice sensations, the feel of the breath in the abdomen, the chest, or at the nose. And this is where I was emphasizing this is something we can do. It's not that we have to do it perfectly. Indeed, we won't. But we can do it well enough to notice effects over time. The mind can calm down. And we can calm down without having solved all of our problems first. This is an amazing fact about us as human beings, that with this simple mental activity that we can do even when things are really bad, often people who have a lot of pain, and maybe someone in this room does right now, typically people, and I will talk about pain a little bit more in a minute, but even when there is a lot going on that's unpleasant, we still tend to have this capacity to direct our attention somewhere and to find something relatively neutral or slightly pleasant. And so the feel of the breath is pretty good for most people much of the time. And then, as I had mentioned, and you probably noticed, there were those moments where you were really trying, and yet you realized that your attention had drifted and you were thinking about something, ruminating, analyzing, and so forth. And I feel it's really important to see that this is normal. It's not a failure. Indeed, it's very amazing habits kicking in. And so our minds quite naturally will do this. And in mindfulness meditation, we do include whatever presents itself. And it's not that we have to fix something or organize it. It's just that simple knowing. And then we come back. And so there's a combination of something to do. Most of us need something to do here, and we can do it um, with this permission just to be real, just to notice in a way where we're not performing, we're not pretending, we're just noticing, this is what's really happening for me. And so this is where, just briefly, um, the application to working with physical pain is one of the more interesting areas in terms of practical applications of mindfulness. It's been well researched. It can help us manage pain. And the way we do it is exactly what we just did. So if part of my body is in pain, perhaps my shoulder, I focus attention somewhere else, right? Um, and the sound, just what we did, the sounds, my breath, somewhere else. And then pain is doing its job, so to speak, when it comes to mind, when it draws our attention. And with mindfulness practice, we do something that can seem a little counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive. We actually bring awareness into that part of our bodies, gently, patiently, just noticing what is it actually like there. And this can take some practice because so much of our response can tend to be quite rationally, I don't want to feel it at all. But we can gently just notice what's there, no obligation to stay there, and then we shift attention somewhere else. So we go back. So there's more to say here, but this is the core of it. It's not real complicated. It can be hard to do, but if you live with pain, then you know that any edge you can get is important. And the promise is not that it will make the pain disappear, but what the science shows is that people who practice in this way can live with their pain without suffering so much. So even when the pain persists, there's not as much cycling through those unhelpful responses of frustration, anger, misery, and so forth. We practice in a fairly similar way with difficult emotions, anxiety, fear, anger, loneliness, and so forth. And here, even if we're not living in pain, as human beings, we're all subject to these states. And perhaps in the times we're living in now, some of us may be subject to them more than normal. And the way we practice, again, is as we've discussed. If I realize that I am grieving or I'm angry, we don't try to fix it directly. We focus our attention somewhere else. I told you I was good at repeating myself. We focus our attention somewhere else, just as we did in the meditation. Ambient sound, sensations in our bodies, the feel of the breath. And then probably at some point, we'll notice that we're mulling something over that is connected to the emotion, or maybe something brand new, right? So we just notice what is happening there. And if it is anxiety, fear, grief, this also we include in our meditation, and the principles are basically the same as working with physical pain. We recognize it's present. We don't panic. We might have that tendency to panic, but we kind of, with practice, remember that we can be aware. We include the physical, palpable sensations that are a component of emotions, usually. And usually there's something we can notice, maybe not always, but usually. But then without trying to fix it, right? We're just being aware of it. So in the meditation, we have permission actually not to do too much. So we have this, in our daily lives, and so much of what we do, we have to get something done. We have to present ourselves in a certain way. We have to pose, right? Pretend in some ways, even if we have to kind of like, no, I'm okay. I can help you with this. In the meditation, it's just like, man, I'm not okay, right? So we can just notice that what is present, and the noticing itself is of value. And again, the science is supporting this, that there's something valuable about being aware of what's actually happening. A reasonable question is, wouldn't it make more sense just to get better at ignoring these things? And It's actually a good question, and there is a place, just for watching another movie or distracting ourselves. There really is an important place for finding things we enjoy and distracting ourselves. But there also is a really interesting place for just being more familiar with what these states are. And so that's part of mindfulness practice, but we don't rush. And so maybe just tuning in a little bit to the experience of the emotion and then shifting the attention back and just staying with the breath, staying with the sensations in the hands or the feet are really good practice. So that's the core of mindfulness practice and its application to working with difficult states, such as physical pain or difficult emotions. There were, by the way, a number of great questions that you all submitted in your registrations. One of those questions was, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? And the answer is that mindfulness is a capacity that we all have, even if someone never has meditated in any formal way. As a normal human being, they have the capacity to be mindful, to pay attention to what they're doing and experiencing. Mindfulness meditation is one form of meditation, and there are dozens of types of meditation. Most of them, not all, but most of them do begin in a similar way as we did, by focusing attention on something relatively neutral. So there are types of meditation such as TM that involve using a mantra, just repeating a word or a phrase in one's mind. And those can be fantastic forms of meditation for calming down. What mindfulness adds to meditation forms that simply focus on the calming down is this inclusion of whatever interrupts that process of calming down. And so it's one form of meditation, though there are others, and many can be explored. And indeed, before we end this session today, we'll do another type of meditation that involves using thoughts more, a loving kindness meditation. So we'll get to that a little bit later. So I would like to talk now, as we come into the second half of this presentation, about ways of integrating more mindfulness into daily life. And this is something that we can do independent of a meditation practice. Although, as a meditation teacher, as an advocate of mindfulness, I would, if you're interested in this at all, probably taking a few minutes every day to meditate would be a good foundation. I don't think that you have to do it a lot. Most of us will get benefit even if for 5 or 10 minutes. It can be hard to bring into our lives, and so be realistic. But even if we don't meditate, there are ways we can bring more awareness into our daily lives. And one example that is closely related to meditation, some are closely related to meditation, others not so much. One that is closely related to meditation is what happens when we're sleeping. And more specifically, what happens when we are supposed to be sleeping, but we wake up and our mind's racing and we're filled with anxiety and so forth. It's very common. It's not just you, it's me. It's very common. And it's very common whether we're in the midst of a pandemic or not. And the things that I've been talking about are quite relevant to what we can do in those moments. So we wake up, we're not fully rested, we might have been sleeping, it was good there, but we're awake, our mind's racing. We know this is not the time to solve our problems or sort it out, but still there's that kind of urgency and so forth. And so there's that opportunity in those moments to begin to remember, okay, even now I have some skills. One thing we can do is what I've been coming back to repeatedly. We can direct our attention to something actually happening that is relatively neutral. And so in the example where it's racing thoughts connected with anxiety, yeah, that's definitely happening. We don't try to fight it. I mean, we may fight it, but there's another response we can make, which is recognize it's there, shift our attention to something else happening in our experience. And it may be just the feel of your body lying on the bed. It may be the feel of your hands. It may be the breath. I invite you to experiment with this the next time this happens, if it happens to you. Just see if you can remember, oh, okay, what was that? Okay, what does one breath feel like right now? And it can be quite interesting to see that we have this capacity and that it can actually help us. So we don't necessarily sit up to meditate or anything like that, but just continuing to lie down, just notice that. And then likewise, when we're drawn back into the racing thoughts, just like, okay, just bring the attention gently back to the feel of our bodies. So there is more to say about that, but that's the core of it. And here at UCLA, we have had some really interesting studies on the value of mindfulness relative to sleep quality. There are other ways of bringing mindfulness into daily life that aren't, so what we do in sleep is, it's kind of like a meditation, right? In those moments, we're not doing anything else. We're hoping we'll go back to sleep. So we just might bring in the elements of the meditation. There are other activities where we're not meditating. Indeed, we're busy. We're doing something, such as eating, such as interacting with others, such as watching the news or bringing in the news and so forth. And so here we can bring more awareness into our experience, and we can do it consciously and intentionally, but we also do it super gently and very playfully. I am not a big advocate of trying to be mindful all of the time and being super aware and talking very slowly. We live our lives, we are aware, but we also can have that orientation to what would it be like to actually pay a little more attention in a gentle and playful way. And so if this were a 90-minute presentation, what we would do right now is we're not doing this, but we would take a break. I would invite you to go get a snack, and then we would come back and take a few minutes to eat that snack in a mindful way. So we're not going to take the time to do that now, but that's homework if you choose to accept it. Ungraded homework. Just experiment. Seriously though, invite you to try that later today. Just take a piece of fruit or a cookie or something you like and just look at it for a few seconds, kind of reflect a little bit on where it came from. Realize that there were a lot of things that were involved in it coming to be in your hand. Whether it was a plant somewhere upon which the apple grew, a tree, or a bush with berries, or maybe a cookie that came out of a factory. And then just pay attention to the process of eating. And that involves both the sensory and also the mental, right? There's the qualities of what it looks like. There's the qualities of what it's like to chew and to taste and to swallow. And there's also just we enter now into this area of desire. There's like noticing what we want and so forth. It can become fascinating just by bringing more attention into, I mean, how do you know when you go to make breakfast, how do you know what you want? Well, we have our routines, we have our habits, and these work fine. And maybe we've thought about them, maybe we haven't, but it can be really interesting just to ask oneself before going to breakfast, what do I want today? And equally interesting is, how do I know what I want, right? And so as you can, it's like even a simple question about breakfast and becoming more attuned to what is the nature of wanting, it can become interesting. But we don't get weird here. It's like it becomes interesting, and this is where the playful, the gentle aspect comes in. very similar in some ways with relationships. And most of the more interesting to me, the questions that you all submitted had to do with relationships, and especially relationships during this period of time, where whether we're sheltering at home alone or with other people, there are issues, right? And so just about sharing space, sharing small apartments with someone, or events taking place within families, uh, such as illness, such as death, where we are isolated and so forth. And so we can bring more awareness into, just as we bring awareness into our own emotions as the foundation. And so as we've discussed and practiced, whatever the emotions are that come by virtue of the relationships we have, or the people we're with, or the people we miss, mindfulness is a capacity for actually responding intelligently to these things. And of course, there's a tremendous amount of grief right now, just being in the situation we're in, quite naturally. Many people are enjoying this period of time. And so our responses are going to vary. With 420 some people on this call, there are 420 different situations. And so not meaning to generalize too much, but the idea is that, first of all, mindfulness is a tool that's very practical relative to an intelligent response to our own emotions around the situation we're in. And this is true, of course, whether we're in a pandemic or not, but it may be especially important now, and you may have the opportunity right now to practice a little bit. And so, what we've covered so far in this presentation is something you can do. Just the meditation, the opening to the emotion, to the realization that, wow, I'm lonely, or wow, it's really hard being with a certain person right now. And then in terms of bringing mindfulness into the relationships, again, super playful, gently, but we can actually do some things. And one thing, again, if we had more time, we're not going to do it right now, but I did it the other day in a class that was really interesting, where I had everyone in the class identify someone either in their space that they're living with, or someone they could call on the phone, and just do a little mindfulness exercise, where the exercise was approach the person, tell them that you're in a mindfulness class, and ask them if they would do a 3-minute exercise with you. And the exercise is, they are supposed to talk for 3 minutes, but silence is okay, so they can take their time. And your job is simply listen and notice what it's like just to listen, where you're not interrupting, you have no responsibility to reply or even show that you care. So you do, just pay attention, notice what it's like to listen, and then ask them a question, to give them a prompt. And so a couple of prompts, and this is going to be homework also, if you wish, ungraded. If you're with a parent, or if you want to call a parent or an aunt or an uncle, someone older than you, the question might be, so what was life like for you when you were my age? And you've explained, like, they're just going to talk, reminisce out loud for about 3 minutes, and your job is just to listen. If you're a little edgier, one would be if you're living with someone right now, where it's a spouse or a lover, a partner. The question might be, so what is it like for you now during this time where we're sheltering at home together? And that can be edgier because the idea is they would have permission to say whatever they wanted, and you just listen. Um, I did this when I taught that class. I did this with my mother, who's in Portland, Oregon, and who, of course, I haven't been with for a while. And it was so amazing, right? She's like, "Okay, well, how old are you?" And we got that, and then she had these memories that came out, and it was so pleasant. And I've done these types of exercises with her over the years, so she doesn't regard me as crazy. And in fact, we both enjoyed it very much. So, if you wish, I invite you to do that exercise also. So let's keep track of the homework, eating something mindfully, doing this sort of relational mindfulness exercise with someone. Another area where all of us almost certainly can bring a little more mindfulness is into our relationship with the news, with social media, and things like that. And so over the past month, just 6 weeks ago, I was on my way to Massachusetts to teach a spring break retreat for Harvard students. And basically on the way there, Harvard shut down. And so we scrambled, we put the retreat online, and using the same form of silence, but also some interaction and so forth. And one thing that we included in the daily schedule was a 10-minute news check. So for the retreat, we had asked people, it was 3 days, we'd asked people just to, obviously we were going to use technology because we were able to connect by technology, but we asked them not to kind of wander around aimlessly as they might be in the habit of doing. But then we included a 10-minute news check. And what we did is like, okay, if you wish, go ahead and check the news right now, but try to stay attuned to your body as you do it. What is it like in your body? So still checking the news, but also staying grounded in the ways that we've been practicing and in the ways that I've described. And I have to admit, I'm one of the teachers, and I've even thought of this exercise, but I found it profound for me personally, just to be that conscious of that. Okay, now I'm checking the news. Now I can stay attuned to what's actually happening for me, and then not just kind of aimlessly wandering around. So this is an area I invite you to explore. It's on this call, I would assume that probably one thing, if there's one thing we all have in common, or most of us have in common, or the thing that we probably most likely have in common is, like a month ago, we would have cared about UCLA basketball. And I freely acknowledge that in February, one of my main interests was, how did the men's team look? Were they going to make the tournament? My brother at one point said, well, they need to win 3 out of their next 4 games. And they were tough games. And lo and behold, they won them, and then everything's canceled. And it was so interesting. That was about the time of this Harvard retreat. It was just so interesting. Like, wait, what am I going to do now? Some of you may have had this experience also. And both the men's and the women's teams were looking promising, and it's like, something I enjoyed, something many of you may have enjoyed or been looking forward to, was suddenly not there to pay attention to. And so we were kind of forced to shift our habits. And so one of the, I still kind of regret it didn't happen, but it did. So one of the opportunities here is to become more aware of what our habits are. And so in February, I really was in the habit of just checking bracketology, like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're okay, probably better off. But we have habits. The point is, we have habits. We have things we do every day, kind of in a routine way, and we can get in the habit of not even noticing that we're doing the same thing. And this can be, it's an area where we can actually find things more interesting if we become more aware of the habits we have. And so especially around use of our technology to check news, to be on social media, then the negative aspects of it, where, you know, our attention easily is manipulated, is an area to bring more awareness. And so that also could be some homework for you. Another area is, I hope I'm not giving you too much homework. Another area is just like our relationship to the living spaces that we are in. And I have done over the years, I've been a serious meditator. I've had the opportunity to do long retreats, and I've done meditation retreats in my own living space numerous times. And one thing I have noticed is just being in my space, things start to improve, right? The pile of junk in the corner, somehow it's easier. It's like in my normal life, I might see the pile of junk in the corner and make a note on a list, you know, instructions to my future self, clean up the junk in the corner. But when I'm in a space where I'm actually paying attention, there's that responsivity to that. Oh, that could change. I could change that. And then it's not that hard. And then I allow myself to do it. And then I notice it feels good. So yeah, more homework. Just as we end today, maybe just look around your room, look around the space you're in, and just notice, how does it feel? What does it feel like to notice something and go, oh, I think I would like that different, right? So again, tuning in more directly just to what we want, rather than to, you know, so the homework is not clean your room. It's like with Diana, actually, I was talking about this as a mindfulness activity, and she says, yeah, I wish you could get my daughter to clean her room. I was like, no, it's not like your mom telling you to clean your room. It's much more playful, right? I mean, clean your room is the second part of this. So we also, once we get the hang of it, we can bring awareness into our lives no matter what we're doing. One of the activities that I enjoy most in normal times is dancing. I have learned how to salsa dance. Living in LA is a wonderful place for salsa dancing. And I'm afraid that in the blurb publicizing this presentation, there was some promise about mindful dancing. We don't have a lot of time, and I want to save a few minutes for the kindness exercise, but what I have to contribute here is, you know, when we dance, it's great to approach it as not a performance. And so some of you even on this call may be performers, dancers, and so forth. But you probably, if you are a dancer, you've learned this, that there's a way of approaching dance where we're not merely trying to give a certain appearance. We're also just tuning into the feel of our bodies and the feel of even of gravity, right? So gravity is, it's not strictly speaking of force, it's kind of the disturbance of space-time due to the unequal distribution of mass, but we experience it as a force. And even in breathing, there's kind of we have to like counteract gravity to draw in air, so our abdomen does its work. So what I have to share about dance is partly joking, partly serious, partly really serious, is, you know, there's a way in which dance is something we enjoy can come out of stillness, even the stillness of meditation, where we tune into the ways in which even when I'm sitting still, there's movement. The breath is moving. The breath is moving. There's sensations of motion because of the force of gravity. And we can begin to move and allow our bodies to move in response to these forces. That is enjoyable. That's more of the headline for a lecture rather than real explanation. Let's take the last few minutes, and I would like to guide you in a loving kindness meditation. This is another type of meditation. I mentioned it earlier, where we use thoughts. We use images. It goes together really well with the basics of mindfulness. If I were teaching someone to use mindfulness to help cope with physical pain, then I would want to also and definitely include this. And so it's a good complement to the basics of mindfulness. And so we'll take a few minutes to do this, if you would. If you find that I'm giving you too many instructions here, respect that. Almost the first principle of this type of meditation is don't work too hard. If you're not in the mood to do it, don't push. Just come back to the feel of your body, the feel of the breath, is what we did earlier. But as we begin, I invite you to bring to mind somebody in your life whom you appreciate. Just see who comes to mind, someone whom it's easy to appreciate. If several are coming to mind, just choosing one for this exercise. If no one's coming to mind, no rush. Just see what happens. Someone may come to mind. It also can be a non-human being, a pet. If someone's come to mind, just visualize them. Just form an image of having seen them somewhere. Maybe you have a picture of them nearby. You might even gaze at that picture. Or just imagine them in a place they might like to be. Maybe a place that you can imagine them liking to go once they can go somewhere. So really playfully, just holding them in mind, you might notice why them? Why did they come to mind? What do you appreciate about them? Their kindness to you, their generosity, their loyalty. So we're using thoughts, we're reflecting here. We're not trying to make ourselves feel something, but if you feel something, of course we include that, the palpable sense of love, appreciation, often in the heart area. You can use a few phrases to wish them well. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be safe. So we're practicing appreciating the goodness in someone and then letting that appreciation have its effect in us. And this can be quite non-trivial. So we'll take just a few more seconds for this, 15 seconds. Just holding them in mind, maybe even a thank you. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. Thank you for being in my life. So we'll end the meditation there. We are running out of time. My name is Marvin G. Belzer, the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. We have a free app called UCLA Mindful. We do offer many online courses and events, including this Sunday morning, Matthew Brentsover, a 3-hour workshop on mindfulness and love. So I have enjoyed talking with you today and wish you all the best. Take care.